Continuing our journey through all of the Beastmen possible legendary lords for the next hopeful DLC for Total War Warhammer 2, I want to talk about Ungrol Four-Horn today. Now, my plan for this week is to talk about the last two special characters, Ungrol Four-Horn and then Slugtongue. And then this coming weekend, Saturday or Sunday, I'll release my Beastmen rework video in the same vein that I did for Greenskins, Empire, and for the Wood Elves. And I think that this one is going to be a very interesting one to talk about because he's going to be different than both Slugtongue and Moonclaw, in that he is also a hero, just like the aforementioned three, and he is a combat character. So we'll talk a little bit more about that after we discuss his lore. And we'll also talk about how that lore really kind of gives some credence to a possible presence in either a DLC or an FLC with a Beastmen-themed DLC. Let's jump into the lore here for Ungrol Four-Horn, Blackheart Horns Thief, the Spurned One. Ungrol Four-Horn is a being consumed with bitterness and spite. There is no more hateful a creature in the old world, for he has been cast out of the ranks of both man and beast. Such was the scale of his transgressions that he has become something of a legend, and to his day he leads as a self-styled beggar king, marching at the head of a ragtag army of outcasts, mutants, and heretics who have nowhere else to run. Ungrol was born with two heads, each of which was possessed with a singular ugliness. The mewling beast was greeted with utter revulsion by his human parents, and so Ungrol was cast out into the woods to die. But he subsisted on a diet of grubs and roots until he was strong enough to hunt and kill. Ungrol eventually found his way to the Man-Blight tribe, where he joined the ranks of the Ungor. Though he had only the most rudimentary hornbuds, the fact Ungrol had two heads was remarkable enough that he was tolerated as a beastman. But still, Ungrol had not found peace. The other Ungors were jealous of his mutation, and the Gors mocked him and beat him for having such small horns. Every day was a new set of demeaning and horrible trials for the creature they mockingly called Four-Horn. One dark night, covered in bruises and bleeding from a dozen wounds, Ungrol could take no more. His tribekin were snoring loudly after a drunken feast which Ungrol was not allowed to attend. He took up a great rock and, approaching the largest of the sleeping figures, bashed his chieftain's brains out. The Bray Shaman was next, throttled by Ungrol's sinewy hands. Ungrol carved off the magnificent horns of the two tribal leaders with his jagged knife, strapping the chieftain's horns to one of his heads and those of the Bray Shaman to the other. Resplendent with his new sets of headgear, Ungrol capered in the moonlight, gazing with manic glee at his shadow and singing Four-Horn, Four-Horn over and over again. Now, to kill a chieftain outside of a challenge is bad enough, but to kill a Bray Shaman is the gravest sin of all. When the tribe found the atrocities Ungrol had committed, they chased him for a night and a day, but Ungrol was ever sly, and he evaded their pursuit in a labyrinth of dark caves. He still dwells there to this day, consumed by enmity and jealous ire. Over the years, Ungrol's legend has spread, and through channeling his vast reservoir of hatred, he has come to be a warrior of some repute. Many Ungors have joined his cause, and he now commands a great army of mutants, outcasts, and monsters that raid the lands of men, taking out their hatred upon any they can catch and keeping their human captives like cattle in the dank depths of the labyrinth of the spurned. Ungrol is a pretty unique character, and I know I said earlier that he was a hero, but it's a little bit different. You have to remember, this is the 7th edition of Warhammer Fantasy, and this didn't get the kind of refined, streamlined rule set of 8th edition. And the way that Ungrol worked was that he could be taken as a leader of an Ungor unit in your army. So rather than having the Ungor unit, I think it was like a 40, 60, or 70. That's quite a range. It's like 40 or 50 points. And you could make him the leader instead. And that was a pretty interesting little mechanic. It's 75 points as I check it right now in the rules here. But the interesting thing about him is that he is, again, not a conventional hero unit. You don't just simply take him in addition to your lord in the army. He's just there. You choose him and he's there. Which I think would be actually kind of an interesting prospect for Beastmen. So kind of hear me out on this. We get something very similar to this with Gotrek and Felix, right? Where we get a wandering lord and hero combination character. Well, it'd be very interesting if Ungrol Four-Horn was like that. He was some sort of wandering epic, or I guess legendary hero choice that you could choose by fulfilling some sort of predetermined requirement for the Beastmen, and then you could bring him into your army. Or if he was the head of a unit of Ungors that was just a special regiment of renown that had him in there. I think that latter one's a little too easy and it's kind of boring, because I think Ungrol 2 could have some fun rules around him. So I think having him as a legendary hero is probably the most likely scenario. Could he be a lord? Absolutely. I mean, the lore talks about him and the Man-Blight tribe, and the Man-Blight tribe is already in the game. If we take a look at the Black Spine Mountains, it's where he actually, or the Man-Blight's tribe itself spawns. So we already get a presence for them in the Southlands. Same thing with the Kingdom of Beasts, which is, again, in the Eye of Vortex campaign and Mortal Empires. So the Man-Blight tribe, though, does really kind of have a vendetta against Ungrol, so maybe him leading that tribe wouldn't make the most sense, but at least it does have a presence in the game already, so it could make some sort of sense that maybe in some creative assembly continuing for the lore, Ungrol takes control of the Man-Blight tribe after raising this little army of mutants and so on and so forth, and says, hey, I'm the leader now. I even have the leader's horns and the Bray Shaman's horns, so I'm the leader now. I'm the Captain No. So I think it'd be pretty fun to see the Man-Blight tribe be a part of this. And I think it'd be a really cool starting position for the southern portion of the Vortex campaign or Ungrol, right? To have a really strong Beastman presence. Now, I will say that the southern portion of the Southlands is starting to get pretty crowded, right? We've got Krokgar down there. We've got Skaven star positions down there. We've now got Imrik down there. We've got Lizardmen down there. So and also we have the Dark Elves with Malice Darkblade. So it's getting a little jammed up. Whereas before, 2 DLCs ago, it was a great place because there was not a lot to go there. So maybe this isn't the best option. You could even have them start in the far northwest corner if we're talking about possible Beastmen starting locations, which we'll really go into in our Beastmen rework video. So I just want to kind of play with that. But he does have some special rules here and some magic items that we'll talk about real quick, because these are, of course, always a large linchpin for any legendary lord. He's got one called Bruised and Bitter. And the way that this works is it allows him to re-roll failed Primal Fury tests, and obviously Primal Fury tests aren't a part of Total War Warhammer 2. So I look at Bruised and Bitter as a way to confer a small leadership bonus and maybe even a small melee attack bonus to units around him. We've never seen a skill per se that is relegated to a specific unit type, in the sense that, okay, this will only work towards Ungors. We see it for heroes and lords when we look at the Guardian passive, but it'd be really cool if the Bruised and Bitter could only apply to Gors and Ungors, because that's the kind of hierarchy. He's basically an Ungor who got mad, took some horns, and made them his own. He is even taken as the leader of an Ungor tribe, or an Ungor unit. So to have him be this guy that can buff up and help increase the leadership of Minotaurs maybe doesn't make the most lore sense, but if we're talking about a legendary lord, who really cares? I want to have good functionality in the game, more so than heavy lore connotations. So if Bruised and Bitter was maybe like a 7 leadership and 2 melee attack buff to everything in 40 meters of radius around him, I think it'd make a really cool position or really cool ability for Ungrol. Now his other thing here is a magic item, the Stolen Crowns. This is pretty cool. Ungrol's horns still contain a residue of their former owner's power, meaning that he can often be found bickering with himself or speaking the dark tongues of magic. And the way that this works is you basically do a leadership test for Ungrol. If he passes it, he gets a buff to his weapon skill and his strength in the game. If he fails it, he becomes a level 1 wizard with a random spell from the lore of the wild each time. And we've kind of seen something like this with Luther Harkin, right? He's got a campaign mechanic that every couple of turns, one of his personalities pops out and he's better at one thing or another. And I think that is such an awesome mechanic, and it's wasted on just one lord. And I think this is a really cool way to play with that. I'm sure we'll see some more of that similar mechanic with Chaos Demons in the future and their fickleness and their very rampant randomness, I guess you could say. But to have it for Ungrol be something where every couple of turns, he switches either to a really strong combat lord or like a hybrid caster lord with the lore of wild. I think that'd be a very interesting way to go about this, where, okay, if he's in his combat lord stance, he gets a weapon strength buff, a melee attack buff, and a melee defense buff. If he's in his wizard stance, quote unquote, then he gets, let's just say, the first, maybe all of the lore of the wild spells, just like Harkon does, but he doesn't get the upgraded versions of it. He just gets all of them unlocked once he completes his quest. Give him all the lore of wild spells and a bonus to, let's just say, speed, a minor bonus to melee defense, and a bonus to winds of magic generation and regeneration. So that way he can actually be a viable wizard. So I think that makes for a cool Beastman lord, because he sits in between the current dichotomy of Beastmen lords, right? Like when we look at Morghur Shadowgrave, who is a hero unit, the Shadowgrave, not Grave, I don't know why I keep saying that, but the Shadowgrave, he is a caster, kind of hybrid melee lord, right? When we take a look at Malagor, he is a caster lord with gigantic wings. Look at, I almost said Gorthor, Khazrak, we look at a melee lord. And the cool thing about this character is, especially if they made him a legendary hero, he could fall between both lines. He could be that kind of melee character sometimes, or a caster sometimes. So I think that makes for a very interesting character to bring into the Beastmen roster, because the Beastmen need such a huge rework across so many different avenues of their playstyle. And this is a really cool way to combine a lot of that into one creature. And it even talks about him being this creature that roams around the land, the beggar king, as it even says. And I really like that, because it's like, okay, if we're going to put Ungrol in the game, we really have to overhaul the way that we do horde mechanics and the way we do Beastmen. So hopefully bringing Ungrol into Total War Warhammer 2 brings some other fresh, fun mechanics with the Beastmen. And we do have some other Beastmen still to talk about here. Like I said, we've got Slug Tongue, who is another caster character that we're going to talk about. And I did forget about this one, but we will talk about just a generic Beast Lord in Gorthor. Even a generic name there, right? But it's going to be fun to kind of continue to explore a possible Beastmen update, because I think this next DLC has to have either Beastmen or Wood Elves, or even both. Both might be a little bit of a stretch when it comes to getting both 2 Old World updates in one DLC, but we'll explore this more in the Old World update video that we're going to do later this week. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment below, all that kind of action. And if you do comment, let me know. Let me know which lords you really want to see added in a Beastmen DLC. Which ones make the most sense for you? Is what we've talked about so far just not on target for you? Do you want to see more Goros, which is a little bit more of a cavalry-based lord, since he's a Centaur, and that also is another character that would be a leader of a Centaur unit, or Tarox, the Brass Bull, to bring Doom Bulls into the game, or Gorthor again, the one we talked about earlier. We've got Slugtongue, Moonclaw. There's so many legendary lords from the Beastmen. So really try to dive in on this one here, guys, because I think there's a lot of fun information we can go through before we actually hit the Beastmen rework. But again, as always, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one, and take care.